I'm very honoured this morning to be interviewing the Right Honourable Dame Jenny Shipley, former Prime Minister of New Zealand and a mentor of mine. Jenny's had a long journey as a culturally competent leader. So Jenny, when you think about your life, actually, it's been marked by leadership, but so much of it has been crossing boundaries and crossing borders. When you were Prime Minister, it was crossing boundaries between different groups of people and trying to bring them together. But post your Prime Ministership, it's been crossing boundaries. And it's not only been Jenny, but her entire family have become honorary Asians, actually, during that time. So tell me, what drives and motivates you to be the culturally competent leader you are?
Well, partly it's curiosity, and partly it's respect. And partly it's, we live in an immensely exciting and interesting world that's more mobile than I could even have imagined in 1990, let alone what I see my grandchildren will inherit. And to me, readiness is an obligation of us all. So look, I knew something was happening. I was given opportunities to deepen my knowledge, and it became completely obvious to me that this half century will be East and Southeast Asia, and perhaps increasingly Central Asia's half century. But I'm equally interested in Africa.
Absolutely,
And
yes.
Africa
and
is on the move.
And you do charitable work there.
Well, I have a project.
So look, talk about the places where you are crossing boundaries. So lots of people know you as a former Prime Minister. They don't know everything you get up to. You don't have to tell us everything. But, talk to us about your cultural, competence journey, because you've needed that. You're all over the place.
Well, look, that's true and it's not true. It's true insofar as when I was in politics, young, female, reform led to fundamental change. New Zealand today is standing on the shoulders of a lot of what we did. To me, that was important. Interestingly, a lot of the countries that are currently on a massively upward trajectory are in a very similar place to New Zealand was in the late 80s, early mid-90s, where they know they have to change, they know they have to open up, they know they have to establish the rule of law, they know that if they get a really clear legal and then economic and social framework, success is theirs. And so there's a huge amount of sharing and learning. I think the second thing that struck me is what I didn't know. And I hate being blocked by what I don't know, and yet in many respects, where do you go? History is history, but it doesn't tell you of the future. So when I saw China on the move, and certainly during my period of chairing APEC, it was very clear to me that what used to be taught to us as some sort of rigid Chinese socialist structure of 5 years of central planning had become an extremely sophisticated, corporate-led, cascading economic and then business strategy with very significant cultural and social elements in it, that while it was still centrally driven by a communist party, there's no question about that, their with market characteristics was what caught my attention. And I spent a lot of time then, and subsequently were invited to conferences, and while I may have contributed, I was keen to learn. So my work today is director on the Boao Forum, the largest think tank in East Asia.
You chair it, don't you?
No, I don't chair it. I'm the only woman director on that board, and it's very much made up of the President or the Prime Minister of China comes to the Boao Forum every year. The board has a private audience with him. So I've been extremely lucky to, even post-politics, be able to continue to observe and learn and form my own view, which I then share with people who are ambitious for themselves and their shareholders, ambitious for their country and their citizens, and understand that interaction is the best form of foreign policy. I think that understanding is genuinely the best form of foreign policy. So to come back to what do I do now, if I give you a this year's snapshot, so I am who I am. I've got corporate interests at home, and I do chair one of the big banks here, or an emerging bank, China Construction Bank's New Zealand subsidiary, which is part of one of the largest banks in the world, Fortune 500 company and so on. And most Westerners, and including New Zealanders, don't appreciate, for example, that the 3 largest banks in China are literally Fortune 500 banks, larger than the Australasian banks and so on. So I'm very interested to see that New Zealand has banking competition. I'm delighted, by the way, that most of my major customers are New Zealand customers, which belies the prejudice that this is supporting China's outreach.
And is that because they're interested in doing business in China?
They want diversification. They are very interested in what we can offer. We actually believe in localization. If I can't establish the reputation of China Construction Bank's global footprint in a country like New Zealand that then attracts New Zealand businesses, then there's something wrong with our strategy. And look, New Zealand benefits from a broader footprint. Why should we have what is almost a cartel of interests dictating the banking sector in New Zealand? Now we're getting distracted. So look, think tanks, my corporate life, I'm on 3 think tanks actually in China. The International Finance Forum in Beijing is a smaller but equally important forum that deals with global financial policy, and it's very closely aligned with Western financial frameworks and how China should migrate and replicate those. The central bank, the banking industry, the regulators, the Reform Commission and others, and then the Western interests who are wanting to watch China but also share. So this is a very interesting intersect of experienced players from the United States, Australia, New Zealand, other jurisdictions, and then China. So there's an enormous amount of learning there. But my cross-cultural curiosity is constantly exposed through a group I'm working with, the former presidents and prime ministers. I've just recently stepped down as vice president of the Club of Madrid, over 104 former. No, it's a really cute club. Look, this year I've been in Azerbaijan, merging democracy, really difficult. But there I sat in a forum. The president of Ukraine was in the chair next to me. These are men who are carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders. The president of Azerbaijan has got part of his country occupied. The Prime Minister of Georgia was in the room. Now these are people who are at the frontier still of trying to break through to establish democracies. I believe in that. That's what gets me up in the morning. And I'm privileged to both watch them and learn and share things that we as New Zealanders, whether we realise it or not, have done well. But also, if I may say so, New Zealand's own journey around Maori and the emancipation of Maori, our ways in which we both have recognised and treat women, our openness towards migration over many, many decades, and even the complexity of the current migration. There are many learnings here that these countries are going through. And so they are hungry to understand how we did it, what were the political ramifications, how they were dealt with, were they impossible to manage, and so on.
So as a pioneer in cross-cultural competent leadership, is everyone catching up now? I mean,
look, I'm optimistic. There are flashpoints, usually born out of ignorance or self-interest. I'm always fascinated in democratic structure that the desire to win has people lead into conversations that are unworthy of a democracy, in my opinion. Insofar as democracy, at its best, is socially inclusive and respectful. It is built on the notion that we are groups of people who are committed to a shared future that's safe for difference, not the same. And that's a very important point. Some people who promote culture, it's fine as long as they like them. The mirror. I believe that a shared society that's safe for difference is a rich society. So we're bound by, obviously, the rule of law and common values around what it means to live in a nation like New Zealand. But fear for the difference, because our history, our present, the journeys we've been on that we made a mess of and then are attempting to recover, this is a very unique country. And so to me, yes, it's tough and yes, it's demanding, but goodness, when you get it right, there's a point of joy, frankly, where your lens is so much wider, your experience is so much richer, and your judgment is enhanced because the way in which cross-cultural experiences bring you to an understanding is that while you bring your own mind to it, often you're then exposed to other sets of values and experiences and notions and scholarship. And it's a little like feminism. You know, it was a very important idea, but it evolved. And I think that the nature of being in a rich cross-cultural environment with an open mind and open ears allows you to look and shape the future in an entirely different way, and that's where I prefer to be.
And so the question is whether we're at that tipping point yet.
No. Look, it's a journey.
It is.
And there are moments where you think this is a very important peak point.
Do you think they've got the why though? I mean, everybody kind of understands now that they really need this cultural capability. I mean, the World Economic Forum has brought out a report which says, you know, one of the key skills you need for the 21st century is cultural capability.
Of course.
Yeah. I mean,
look, I think any successful person, corporation, country understands EQ, IQ and CQ. So, and CQ is the new. EQ was highly fashionable a decade ago, you know, not just being straight line, hard line, but actually mindfulness and so on. If you then lay over a cultural appetite and awareness, and then capability. So capability is essential, but actually you have to be open to it. It's a little like our experiences in gender. You know, I spent a lot of my early life, not only here, but in Australia and other places, thinking, how many times do I have to go through this? Sort of establishing the fact that this was not a game, I was here to do business and so on. But eventually you get there, and people see, gosh, that there is opportunity.
Absolutely. So in terms of shifting the dial in organisations, of course, that is the job of culturally competent leaders.
It is.
That you can see it, but then you need to bring the rest of the organisation with you. So, you know, that's a tough journey too, and you've done that in many places. You've had to do that in government and at the helm of companies. Tell me, you know, what have you found the most challenging in trying to shift the dial, really, in companies?
Well, it's actually often it starts off with the knowledge and why. Let me give you a recent example. I chaired Genesis Energy, a large energy company, and we decided to do a cultural stock take. And so we asked people their ethnicity, and they quite properly. We got a low response back. And we then thought, now why didn't they answer? And that's a legitimate question. And when we said, look, we want to be an organisation, because we put a huge weight on culture, health and safety culture, caring culture of our employees, but we also explained in the second round that we wanted to really understand and be empathetic with our customers, so that when we were confronted with either product design or services or needs or problems and challenges, if we understood who our customers were and knew that we had a workforce that was also skilled and equipped both technically and socially and then culturally, that we would be very likely to be a highly successful organisation. In an instant, people told us who they were. But I think that was a connection of, well, I have an identity and you're proud of it, and then it has value even in the context of our business. So it is up to us as leaders to be careful not to, in stock taking, to be just counting. The why you count and the value of having counted, what you then allow in the depth of understanding and engagement. So they were basically saying to me, look, yes, I'm present, but this isn't a roll call. But if it's an engagement you want to need to explain, so in addition to being present, being engaged, then that's when you get the switch over in the corporate structure. And so my advice would be, through my learning, it's extremely important if you're going to be effective in a diverse customer focused organisation and market. But you have to go through the journey of firstly knowing why you're present and who you're genuinely seeking to engage with, and whether it's engagement not just in a push toward them, but walking with them and caring about them and being responsive and empathetic. when you hit those sweet spots of really good investment in your people, very good product design that resonates with customers, then you're really in EBITDA growth.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I agree. And when I look around the boards, it's the same. You know, so many boards of companies who do most of their business in Asia, and they don't have any Asians on the board.
Sure.
It's just extraordinary.
Well, I mean, I could be accused of that because I'm not Asian. I think, my point here is, I think representation and knowledge can be different.
It's true.
So again, when we're looking to have diverse boards, we need people who are qualified, which is the IQ piece. We need that EQ in terms of being open and empathetic and curious and emotionally mature to go on its journeys.
Also understanding how to fit in. I mean, you know.
Well, that's right. That's right. But fitting in and then being able to shift and persuade and share. Well, it's hard, but it's essential because in this cultural piece, this is not an eternal lecture. This, again, coming back to the word of engagement. If you can get to the point of sharing knowledge and people then having an understanding of why it's relevant, but in the working with your customers, being able to present in a way that resonates respectfully, that's when you're in the zone. So coming back to New Zealand, even if we think about a flourishing tourism system, I'm shocked when I hear tourism leaders talking about numbers as if people are abstracts. And our numbers have gone from here to there. Well, that's good on you. That's about us. It's about us clicking the ticket. But actually, if we want repeat customers and enduring experiences and people constantly saying, you can't not go back to New Zealand, we have to move from that, God, that present, isn't that exciting? And most people, by the way, I hear them describing, particularly Asian tourists, as, they're present in such numbers, how will we manage them? As opposed to, isn't this wonderful that a country of people not like us are so curious about the things
it's something that I've mused over all my life. That just when something is visually different, it has quite a different impact on people.
That's true.
Yeah, they tend to think there are lots of them when actually there aren't that many of them. It's just that they look visibly different. So look, you've had a lifetime of leadership in this area and a lifetime of learning and many, many more years to go. But if you were to summarise your 3 key points, because there'll be lots of leaders out there who are looking at the series and thinking, well, gee, how do I start? Well, how did they start?
Well, firstly, look, leave grandma at home. In other words, all the things you have been socialised in believing and think you know, don't dismiss them, but park them. And then ask yourself, what does the future look like? Both benefits and risks. And then go on a journey of open-minded curiosity, because it will be rich in personal learning and it will be rewarding in many other aspects if you get it right, including the social dividend, the financial dividend, and the diversity dividend is very materially real for personal growth, but also for business bottom line. It's
just good for business.
Well, interestingly, my greatest gain has been for personal growth. The joy and experiences I've acquired through being open-minded with Maori in the first instance, and my learning journey there over 30 years now has been one of the richest experiences I could hope to have.
Isn't it interesting that you passed all of that on to your children too, because they then went on to have very illustrious careers in China?
Well, certainly, but I also took them to Waitangi, and I've also made them understand who we are, not who they are. They have a very clear, identity, but then there's a who we are. And for me, I just treasure the difference that I see in so many aspects of New Zealand life. When I went to China, I in the end insisted that to myself, my children would not be late in understanding what was coming. And both of them have lived in China.
So talk to me about that future generation, because of course, for them, it's just business as usual. This is not different. It's not unusual. They're used to being in a very multicultural society.
Yes, they are, and both of them
operating across boundaries.
Both of them it was curiosity and the need to learn, but then understanding, and frankly, to do China well, you need to be present as often as you can. I mean, people who think they're going to conquer China by email or on e-platform, you still have to be able to present your value proposition and your brand, and that takes a lot of thinking about how successfully do that. So these two young people, Ben, when he was about 22, I dropped him off to stay with a friend in Shanghai, and I thought he'd stay for a month. And in the end, he stayed for about 6 years. And only sold his business when he and his partner decided to marry and have a little person. Anna, my daughter, had worked in Europe and London for many years and had the opportunity to go and lead the marketing and comms role for Nokia in China, Japan and Korea, based in Beijing. And again, snapped at the opportunity. 2 years of...
But do you think that's because you valued
Oh, look,
Asia?
no, of course.
Yes.
Well, it wasn't so much
very
because
important.
I valued it. They were not afraid. They saw it as an opportunity, not a risk. They saw it as an essential piece of business learning, not an imposition. They did not approach it as expats. They approached it as young Kiwis abroad who were just doing stuff and were piling up knowledge and experiences.
But you're right, it's because they viewed it as valuable.
Of course.
Because it's not new lands, it's new eyes. I mean, you know, we've always had lots of different people in New Zealand. China's always been there, but it's how you value it. It's about the perception of it. Yeah.
Well, you have to respect it before you can value it.
That's right.
And I deeply respect people's history. You know, the scholarship in China makes me weep in its depth, and the diligence of the Chinese people and their pride in their history and their knowledge of their history. And it's so colourful, good and bad.
Yes.
And I keep saying to them, you know, the stories good and bad that make us who we are.
Right. We
shouldn't be afraid of these things. But
so your vision ultimately for New Zealand?
Look, we are a small nation at the bottom of the Asia-Pacific region. While we've made our wealth that we stand on, at least up until very recently, looking west and north, there is no question in my mind that we have a huge advantage because of geopolitical and physical and attitudinal attributes, that we can maintain those traditions and values but also look east and build on another set of rich experiences that will make New Zealanders better. They may not realise it, but it will make us all better. I mean, we are one of the latest and youngest nations on earth, with the exception of the Namibias and Timor-Lestes, but one of the most latest colonised in European terms. And even with Maori, it appears that, you know, many other areas had long settled populations prior to Maori being here. Putting that aside, I just think that fleet-footed, fresh, non-threatening to anyone else, but intelligent and able to engage. They like knowing us because there's a learning journey.
Yes, there is.
A respectful learning journey. We need to know them because they are our customers of tomorrow. And look, if you get, you go to China today, all I can do is to your listeners is to say, leave a grandmother home and buy a ticket.
Yeah.
And whichever cities you choose, someone once said to me, look, if you want to get a quick snapshot, 200 years of history Shanghai, 1,000 years of history Beijing, 4,000 years of history Xi'an. And in a snapshot you'll get modern, cosmopolitan, world-leading markets, every aspect of what, equal to London and New York and exchanges and banking and so on. Beijing, you see all the traditions, the emperor. You know, the government is still there, but you're close to the emperor, and everything you look at in whichever direction is steeped on those dynasties. And Xi'an reminds you of the scholarship and the technology. The exciting thing I see that China is doing is, I mean, it's on its own journey, but often when I'm at conferences there and I hear new statements or phrases come out and I think, oh dear, what's this? Which is more about me, by the way, than them quite often. But 2 years ago, the concept of the One Belt, One Road emerged, and I thought that's interesting. And now it's morphed into the One Belt, One Road maritime states, of which New Zealand is one, which they recognise. It's now developing into the One Belt, One Road cities. Don't underestimate the power of the strategy. China is reaching out to recreate the Silk Routes of historic trading, cultural interface and intersect, sharing. Now, there are many reasons you could argue as to why they might be doing this, the rising of all ships not leaving their neighbours out and so on. But to me, it's going to create a new cultural explosion of knowledge that the West is almost unaware of. I just quickly go back to Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan right now is having a brand new pipeline put through, a gas pipeline, and a fast rail gauge that's coming right from China through the bottom of Central Asia into Europe, because people are worried about going north. These strategies are opening up what was a landlocked environment, which I believe we're about to see become land-linked. And that strategy, and it is a strategy, a fundamental strategy, and the investment that's flowing behind it is going into countries that much of the world does not know about, because they've been extremely isolated both politically and physically. As I watched China over the last 2 and a bit decades unlock their country by connecting people, the explosion of exchange, human exchange, cultural exchange, economic activity is there for all to see. And mark my words, the cultural connecting and opening up of the One Belt, One Road strategy, I think will define the next 50 years in Central, Southeast Asia and Central Asia's, or East Asia, Southeast Asia, Central Asia and South Asia's history, and it will go right through into Europe. New Zealand has to be careful not to be left off this, because while China has engaged quite effectively into the Asia-Pacific region, what I see them now doing is massively turning their attention to areas that we know very little about, and yet they are rich in cultural history. You sit in Azerbaijan and out the window of your hotel you can see Ottoman relics as people came up from the northern parts of Africa through the Middle East, right up through Central Asia and back. And you know, the Khans were coming one way and they were coming the other, and it swept to and fro over many years. You're parked next to the Caspian Sea and you think about the Bible stories you learned, and you realise that we're about as a generation to have that history unlocked again in a way that I don't think we've seen. So if people think cultural complexity is demanding, wake up. Yeah. Because there is a new world of middle class people who are going to move and buy and sell and engage, and they choose, not us.
No, and if you don't have cultural competence, you won't see
Well,
it.
that's right. So make the choice of jandal wearing, remote and ignorant, or engaged, enlightened and inspired. New Zealand's people who arrived here in many vessels, in my view, were courageous, whether they were Maori, Pacific, or my ancestors who arrived here in 1842. The courage we require today is to think about what that next wave of connectedness means. It's bigger, it's far more dramatic, and it does require more mind width and bandwidth, because it's not just a single link. It is the most exciting thing I could have hoped to see in my lifetime. But competence, actually open-mindedness, then a curiosity, and then a willingness to both learn and then share, will make us rich personally in our mindset and our interaction, but it will also continue to build another layer of wealth on this small country that's been first world for quite remarkably for most of its developed period. But we have to make this transition, because those who do will remain on the trajectory of the wealth of the next millenniums that come toward us. Those who think this is too hard, welcome to the world of insular behaviour, small-mindedness, and a very poor legacy to pass to children. I don't intend to be guilty of that.
No.
My children will fly,
I see that.
and I hope that their children, my second grandchild, Flynn, was born in Beijing on the 1st of October, National Day.
Yes.
And his mother is a dragon, and I am a dragon.
Oh my goodness.
And I remember my friend saying to me, you know, this child could rule the world.
Yes.
I would want him to rule with an open mind. He is blonde and gorgeous, but I hope that some part of where he stood when he was born will allow his generation to have a lens that takes us in the same way that the explorers who got here got us to where we are now, to a place that's worthy, and I'm confident he'll do that.
Oh, Jenny, and I'm very grateful for you sharing your cultural intelligence with us today.
My pleasure.